Hey friends, it's Justin, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are getting inky with some distress spray stains using some brand new products from scrapbook.com. We're going to be using the Cosmic Rub-On Transfers and the Astronaut and Rocket Shape Dyes as the core elements for this card. Now, when I work with distress spray stains, I like to use distress watercolor cardstock, so I am going to take a full-size panel and trim it down to get a panel that is A2 sized, meaning 4¼ by 5½, and put it inside my splatter box. I'm then going to use my distress sprayer so that I can spray the entire panel with water. This is going to be really important because we want to make sure that the entire panel has nice water coverage, which makes the spray stains move even easier across the panel. I am going to start off by using some Picked Raspberry Distress Spray Stain, and I'm going to just spritz it a couple times onto our panel and then move on to some Carved Pumpkin. And I'm trying to make sure to get like colors to combine so I don't create anything that's muddy. So with my Wilted Violet, I'm going to try to spray it closer to the Picked Raspberry, just because I know the Picked Raspberry will work nicely, even going back and pulling in the Picked Raspberry once again to spray. Using some Twisted Citron, I'm going to do a couple spritzes of this onto our panel, along with some Peacock Feathers Distress Spray Stain as well. This is just going to act as a really nice gap between all the colors, using a little bit of mustard seed as well. And then I'm just going to start going in and I'm going to dab off some of the excess on the sides of the paper towel that I've laid out in my splatter box. I'm going to go back in using some of the spray stains we've used already to just add a little bit more color to the card. So I'm using some of that Wilted Violet, Picked Raspberry, Peacock Feathers, Twisted Citron, and this just really makes this background have all the colors bleed nicely together, and I'm just trying to be conscious to blend them nicely. I'm going to add a little bit more of that Picked Raspberry color to the different corners of the card, along with a little bit of Carved Pumpkin as well, just to give this card a little bit of warmth. And then dabbing off the excess that builds up on the sides, I get a really nice sort of feel once I add this final Wilted Violet. So you're going to see what our final panel looks like, and I'm going to set that aside for later. Now we're going to use the rocket dies included in the Astronaut and Rocket Shape dies for the main elements for this card, and I'm going to die cut some panels from the Hooray Pattern Paper Collection along with the Pastels Glossy cardstock. Now, the Hooray paper panel has this really nice, slightly off-white paper that I wanted to use, and then we are going to pull in the mint color along with the pink color from the glossy pastel paper pack, and this is going to allow us to add elements to our rocket that have a nice sort of shine to it. I kind of thought you would play off of the metallicness that's included with a rocket itself, so we're also going to be using a little bit of mixed media white paper as some base elements for the project. I am just going to take out the different dies and lay them out onto the panels of paper that we have pulled out of our paper pads and tack them all down with some mint tape. One thing that I like to do to minimize the amount of passes that I have to do through my die cutting machine is I like to cut my panels around the different size die cuts so that I can fit more die cuts with the paper onto my cutting plates. So that's why I like to go in with my scissors, trim each of the elements so that they're ready to go. I'm going to add just a couple of these elements as well to the glossy pink paper that we pulled from the pastel glossy cardstock. The pink is going to act on more of the accent colors for the rocket, where the mint color is going to act more as the base colors. Now from that off-white paper that I pulled from the Hooray paper pad, I am going to die cut the body portion of our rocket ship, and then we are also going to ink blend this with the Shaded Lilac Distress ink. Now most of the elements for our rocket have that glossy cardstock being used, and you're not going to be able to ink blend the edges of this, but I thought that for this off-white it'd look really cool with some Shaded Lilac Distress ink blended on the sides. I'm also going to use the little flame that we die cut and blend that with some Mustard Seed Distress ink along with Carved Pumpkin Distress ink as well, and this is going to give a really nice flame effect for the bottom of our rocket. I think that this flame is just going to add a really nice sort of element, and the ink blending ombre is going to work really well for our project. Now, one thing that I love about scrapbook.com shape die sets is they do show you on most of the packaging what the image should look like when you're done, so I'm going to use that as sort of a map as I'm putting my rocket together. I'm using my Misty Precision glue press, and I'm going to be adding liquid adhesive to the back of my panels so that I can adhere them to my base. Now, that mint glossy cardstock is going to be sort of the base of our rocket, and then I'm going to be adhering the elements on top of it. One thing I'd like to point out is when you're working with glossy cardstock, it's going to take a little bit extra time for that liquid adhesive to fully set in comparison to regular paper, just because the glossy cardstock has less of a friction and you're going to be able to sort of jiggle around those pieces on top of glossy cardstock just a little bit longer. So be patient, maybe set it aside to dry, put a little bit of pressure on top of it while it's drying. You're not going to need a crazy amount of time for it to put into place, but it might just take a little bit longer than you would expect with standard paper. So I do get all of my little elements for my rocket in place, and I put a little bit of adhesive onto the back of it so that I can get my little flame nice and situated, and I think that's just like the perfect pop of color for this rocket. So all of my elements are aside, and I'm going to use a scrap piece of mixed media black paper with the Cosmic Rub-Ons to get a sentiment for my card. I am going to cut out the I love you to the moon and back sentiment from the Rub-Ons and place it onto the mixed media black cardstock. I'm just going to sort of lightly put it into place. I'm not going to sort of heavily set it. And then what I like to do is process it through my die cutting machine to get some nice pressure to the card. You also could use the little popsicle stick that's included with the rub-ons, and you can use that to add individual pressure to each of the items. I like to pass it through my die cutting machine first, and then I like to start to gently take the rub-on peel off, and then if I notice anything that's getting caught on the peel portion, I'll lay it back down and use the popsicle stick to rub it back into place. So now I'm also going to use my scissors and fussy cut out the sentiment so I get a nice tight border around all the letters and the shape of the moon. Fussy cutting can take a little bit of time, but I just sort of like to take the moment to be extra careful as I glide the paper around my detail scissors to get a nice precision cut. Once I finish with my sentiment and shape element, I'm going to set it aside, and then I'm going to pull back in our Distress Spray Stain background and do a little bit of paper splattering. I'm going to pull in some opaque white paper splatter from Picket Fence Studios, which is one of my go-tos when splattering. But in addition to this, I wanted to add some metallic stars as well, so I'm adding some opaque silver. So I'm going to put that onto our little acrylic block. I like to use the acrylic block because it just makes cleanup a little bit easier as opposed to if I put it directly onto my glass mat, but you do you, whatever works best. For stars, I like to use a metallic and a white in conjunction because I think that it just adds a really nice sort of variance with the little splatter elements. You could also use a metallic gold splatter. I think that would work really nicely. So here's a closer look as to what that looks like when it's all completed. And then I am going to use some more Cosmic Rub-Ons onto our project to add some little details. So I'm just going to put a bunch of different stars and planets into place and that I've already cut out off camera. So I'm just going to kind of lightly press them down, not enough that I can take the backing off yet, just enough that they're nicely secured into place while I'm mapping everything out. I like to add that little extra pressure once I'm happy with the location of it, but what's nice about rub-ons is if you haven't put some pressure onto the individual elements yet, it can be easier to kind of move them around if need be. I think that these rub-ons are going to work really nicely with this background because they're going to pop great as well. You can always add different die cuts or stamps that you may have in your stash, but at least with rub-ons, it takes out the element that you've got to do any sort of coloring, any sort of ink blending, any sort of special stacked adhering like you do sometimes with layered die cuts. Not that it's a problem, but sometimes it's nice to have those shortcut breaks that a rub-on transfer can provide. So I use my die cutting machine to add some pressure to them, and then I take off each of the backing pieces of the rub-on one by one. Now, using the nested wavy rectangles, I am going to die cut one of the wavy rectangles from our multicolored Distress Spray Stain background, and I'm going to use some mint tape to hold it into place. Now, I do place the mint tape rather strategically, that I don't want any of it going over a rub-on transfer because it would probably pull it off when the tape is removed. I'm going to use a piece of mixed media white cardstock as well with the slightly larger wavy nested rectangle, this way that I can layer the two die cuts nicely on top of each other to get a frame effect. I'm using the Cosmic A2 pattern paper pad for a little bit of pattern paper inspiration as well, and I decide to use this starry background because I think it'll coordinate really nicely with the different rub-ons that we used for our inky portion of our card. So using liquid adhesive, I'm going to take the Distress Spray Stain die cut and adhere it directly on top of the wavy rectangle of the white mixed media paper. And then I'm going to use liquid adhesive once again to adhere this entire unit on top of our pattern paper A2 size background. So I think that this is going to work really nicely together, and then we can begin the process of adding our elements on top. And I'm going to do that using some foam tape because this is going to allow both our sentiment and our rocket ship to get some nice dimension and almost give them a little bit of lift off of the paper as well. I love using foam tape for my projects because they really allow me to get some nice special feature sort of action going on. It lets the recipient know like what you want them to focus on. As much as I love that beautiful spray stain background that we made along with the galactic theme, the rocket and the sentiment really are the stars of the show, and I think the foam tape allows them to be that. Now, of course, I like to, between takes, clean up all of my little backings from my foam tape, so I'll make sure that that is nice and clean before we move on to the next portion of the card. The last step that I usually like to do is adding embellishments to our project, so I'm going to use some holographic silver sparkle spots by Trinity Stamps just to add a little bit of extra glitz and glam to our card. I'm going to adhere them to our galactic background, and I only end up putting like 3 of them on the card because there's so much going on that you don't need too much of it. So once the sequins are nicely into place, I do use my liquid adhesive on the back of our entire card unit, and then I am going to adhere this directly to an A2 size card panel that I have pre-cut off camera. So it's going to fit perfectly onto my card base, and once I'm happy with the placement, this card is going to be fully complete. And I think it's just so perfect to send off to a loved one, give them a little bit of extra love if they need it, or you just want to say hi, and then also they're going to just ooh and ah at that rainbow galactic background. Thank you so very much for stopping by my YouTube channel today for some crafty and out-of-this-world inspiration. If you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe, and go ahead and check out the links below for products that I use during this video. Using those links do help support me in my crafting, and they do so at no additional cost to you, so thank you very much in advance. Thank you once again for stopping by my channel, and happy crafting. Goodbye!